The mist hanging over the Great Lake of Tunnel Sap in the year 1177 does not smell of rain, it smells of stagnation and impending iron. For centuries, the Khmer Empire had sat secure in its inland capital of Angkor, a sprawling stone metropolis believed to be untouchable by the fleets of the coast. They were wrong. Out of the fog emerged not a diplomatic envoy, but a nightmare of wood and bronze, a fleet of war canoes piloted by men who treated the water as a second skin. These were the Khams. They had navigated their shallow draft vessels all the way up the Mekong River, bypassing the Khmer defenses with the silence of a rising tide. When the alarm finally rang out, it was too late. The Khams did not come to occupy, they came to decapitate. They sacked the city, killed the Khmer king Tribhu Vanaditya, and stripped the gold from the temples, vanishing back into the water with the efficiency of a receding flood. This raid was not merely an act of piracy, it was the violent assertion of a civilization that dominated the South China Sea for over a millennium, a civilization that history has largely reduced to a footnote of ruins and dust. To understand the ferocity of that attack, one must look away from the solid earth and toward the volatile sea. The kingdom of Champa was never a single, monolithic empire like China to the north or Angkor to the west. It was a mandala, a constellation of independent principalities stretching along the central coast of modern-day Vietnam, united only by language, religion, and the rhythm of the monsoon winds. They were the Phoenicians of Asia, masters of a maritime domain that connected the Persian Gulf to the ports of southern China. Their power did not lie in vast tracts of rice paddies, but in the choke points of international trade. If you were a merchant sailing from India to China in the 10th century, you did not pass through these waters without paying tribute to the Cham kings. Their ports, like the fortified island of Tsulao Cham, served as both sanctuaries for freshwater and predatory checkpoints where the line between taxation and piracy was often blurred. This mastery of the waves was born of necessity and violence. The genesis of this polity traces back to 192 AD, in the heat of a rebellion against the Han Chinese dynasty. A local official named Ku Lin overthrew the Chinese magistrate in the district of Xianglin, establishing the entity the Chinese would call Lini, the precursor to Champa. From the very beginning, their existence was defined by a refusal to submit to the giant in the north. Unlike the Vietnamese, who absorbed Chinese bureaucracy and Confucian rigidity, the Khams looked westward across the ocean. They adopted the gods of India, erecting brick towers to Shiva and Vishnu, turning their coastal valleys into a reflection of the Hindu cosmos. Yet, this spiritual devotion was paired with a brutal pragmatism. Their economy thrived on the export of ivory, rhinoceros horn, and the incredibly valuable eaglewood, a resinous heartwood used for incense that was worth its weight in gold in the markets of the Middle East and China. The wealth generated by this trade made Champa a target, drawing the gaze of empires hungry for plunder. In the 13th century, the Khams found themselves staring down the barrel of the most terrifying military machine the world had ever seen, the Mongol Yuan dynasty. Kublai Khan, having crushed the Song dynasty in China, demanded submission. The Cham king Indravarman V refused. In 1283, a Mongol fleet under General Sojita landed on the coast, expecting a quick conquest. They captured the capital of Vijaya, but they found it empty. The Khams had not stood to fight in the open fields where the Mongol cavalry reigned supreme, they had vanished into the Truong Sun Mountains. For 2 years, the Mongols rotted in the heat. They were bled dry by ambushes, disease, and a lack of supplies, fighting a phantom enemy that refused to give battle. The invincible army was forced to retreat, beaten not by superior numbers, but by the jungle and the indomitable will of a people who knew their terrain better than they knew their own skin. But survival in this region was a zero-sum game, and the retreat of the Mongols only left a power vacuum that would be filled by a more intimate enemy. To the north lay Dai Viet, the Vietnamese state that was slowly, inexorably pushing south, a historical movement known as Nam Tien. The friction between these two civilizations, one Confucian and agricultural, the other Hindu-Islamic and maritime, ground down the borders for centuries. In the late 14th century, Champa produced a leader who would nearly reverse this tide. Known to the Vietnamese as Che Bong Na, or the Red King, he united the Cham principalities and launched a series of devastating invasions against Dai Viet. Between 1371 and 1383, his forces sacked the Vietnamese capital of Tang Long, modern Hanoi, 4 times, burning the royal palaces and forcing the Vietnamese emperor to flee. For a brief, violent window, it seemed as though the Khams might become the hegemons of Indochina. The end of the Red King was as sudden as it was cinematic. In 1390, during a naval battle, a Vietnamese officer ordered a volley of musketry, a new technology in the region, toward the Cham flagship. Che Bong Na was struck and killed instantly. His death broke the spine of Cham unity. Without his unifying terror, the mandala fractured, and the Vietnamese press south resumed with renewed fury. The decisive blow fell in 1471. The Vietnamese Emperor Lu Tan Ton raised a massive army and descended upon the Cham capital of Vijaya. This was not a raid, it was an annihilation. The siege lasted weeks, but when the walls were breached, the slaughter was industrial in scale. Vietnamese chronicles record that 60,000 Khams were killed and 30,000 captured, including the royal family. The capital was obliterated, the territory annexed, and the once proud kingdom was reduced to a few fragmented principalities in the south, surviving on the sufferance of their conquerors. The slow death of Champa continued for another 4 centuries, a long twilight of shrinking borders and eroding autonomy. By the early 19th century, only the small principality of Panduranga remained, a vassal state clinging to existence. In 1832, the Vietnamese Emperor Minh Mang decided to erase even this final vestige. He accused the Cham leaders of treason, arrested the last king, Phaok, and annexed the territory directly into the Vietnamese administrative system. The reaction was a desperate, spasmodic revolt. A Muslim cleric named Khattab Sumat returned from Mecca and declared a jihad against the Vietnamese, rallying both Khams and mountain tribes in a holy war. They fought with the desperation of the doomed, but the reprisals were horrific. Minh Mang's forces crushed the rebellion, burned the mosques, and instituted a policy of forced assimilation. The Cham people were ordered to adopt Vietnamese dress, customs, and language. They were no longer citizens of an ancient kingdom, they were subjects of a new order, their identity systematically dismantled. Today, the physical remnants of Champa are scattered across the central coast of Vietnam like bones in an open grave. The sanctuary of my son, once the spiritual heart of the empire where kings communed with Shiva, is a cluster of red brick towers rotting in a valley cratered by American B-52 bombers from a much later war. The faces of their gods have been sheared off by time and shrapnel. Yet, the legacy persists in the shadows. It survives in the genetic makeup of the population, in the specialized Cham curry found in southern markets, and in the superstitions of Vietnamese fishermen who worship the whale, a practice inherited directly from the sea gods of the people they conquered. The Khams did not vanish, they were absorbed, their history rewritten by the victors, leaving behind only the silent, stubborn brick towers to testify that once, they ruled the waves where others merely sailed.